outside agencies as well. For that reason, I'm inclined to support this amendment. I would add that it is unfortunate that sometimes amendments seem arbitrary. Perhaps that's something we could work on in the future, but some funding I think is better than none.
Anyone else for the first time? For the first time? Councilor Powers for the second time.
Thank you, Your Honor. Could we get a clarification as to where this money's coming from? Are we adding it to the bottom line of the proposed budget? I heard the word reconfiguration. This is exactly what are we voting on for this?
City Manager?
Yes, Your Honor, the budget includes a number of line items throughout it that we budget for the average winter, for example. So, and we also have attrition through the year relative to lapsed salary and things of that nature. Typically, any monies that are not spent at the end of a fiscal year roll over and then become part of the next fiscal year to buy down the cost of doing business. So theoretically, what we'd be doing here with a small amount of money would be to absorbing a portion of that lapsed dollar, if you will, which would then reduce the amount that would go forward next year to pay down the cost of doing government services in the following fiscal year.
Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Your Honor. The City Manager answered one of my questions very succinctly, and I want to make it very clear that it's not going to increase the budget. And a number of these agencies that I've already been passed, over the last 5 years, when I first got here on City Council, we were going through a major recession, they called it. And we asked everybody, department heads, outside agencies, everybody that had anything to do with our budget, to hold the line. And these outside agencies did. They did, and they do for less. And now it's time to start making up for that. Because over the last 4 or 5 years, their costs have gone up. And I don't know if you've noticed, if you're a member of the United Way or any other, one of the other social service agencies, the giving has not responded to the times. The giving is down, but the need is still there, and it's up. And these people have been holding the line, and they've been doing a wonderful job. And it's time to recognize that they need to have a little bit more money to do their job, so that the services that they provide don't fall on us, because they're going to. These agencies aren't able to do their jobs. Bet your bottom dollar, people are going to be lining up at City Hall, and they're going to be getting their services here. So, I think this is a wonderful compromise. Not a wonderful compromise, put it that way. I'm going to vote for it anyway, and I really urge you. Come on, guys. No, really help us here. This is something that we really need to do, and people out there are going to love you for it.
Councilor Patty.
Thank you, Your Honor. I like love, but I don't know about the love. There may be some love, maybe not, but I would just like to echo. I think it's a reasonable. I'm sorry, I almost went off color there, but I just want to point out, and I apologize for neglecting to mention this when I read the motion. The total amount of money that's being requested is $18,000. I think that's something we can easily find without adding another penny to the tax rate, the taxpayers, and it's something I think we can manage. I see these programs as being very legitimate, very helpful, and they are investments in our community, not only for people's health and well-being, but also it saves, these programs help save not only the taxpayer, but all of us in financial ways. If you just think about it, the community kitchen, how they help people who are struggling, families, working families. Transportation, how many of our folks who are in need of services, who otherwise would be isolated and shut in. helping them to take the friendly bus and get to their doctor's appointments, or even to get out and shop or to socialize with other people. Otherwise, they would be alone. The 100-night shelter has done an unbelievable job, I think, in creating what I think is fast becoming a model social service agency for this community, and the folks in the cold weather shelter who are taken care of, otherwise might be wandering the streets during the cold winter months and breaking a window, so they could be arrested and brought up to the, put in protective custody and put in the Cheshire County House of Corrections, or I know there's a holding cell at the police station, and they'd have to be charged with a crime. But if you're going to make a choice between freezing or getting a decent meal, wouldn't you rather be in a warm place? That's a heartfelt sentiment I'm expressing, but also it saves real dollars. And I would ask that we all support this motion.
Council Fileault.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would hope the council would break down this line item for line item, as Council Richards says. You know, to include this many light items in one thing. You might have different councilors here with different opinions of specific agencies. But one that I have to bring up that I completely 100% disagree with, and I actually think shouldn't be funded at all by the city, is the 100-night shelter. When they came before the city a few years ago, their comments were, if we allowed Lamson Street to open, they would never come back to the city for a penny. Those of us that were on the council at the time, most of you remember that. They wouldn't come back for a penny. Well, that took about 15 minutes. One of the biggest problems I have with that, as most of you know, I chaired a committee that looked at outside agencies that was put together by former Mayor Lynch. I asked the city clerk if she could research the criteria for outside agencies, and you have a copy of this on your desk. Let me read you some minimum requirements on a paragraph here. FOP minutes from 1998, and once again, this is a policy that's still in force that the council uses, indicate a threshold of 84 or 70% of clients served be Keene residents as a minimum requirement in order for funding to even be considered. Now, 70% of Keene residents. The last report we got back from the city, it was 20 to 30% Keene residents, 70 to 80% not from Keene. 70 to 80%. How many of you are elected by non-Keene residents? None. 100% Keene residents. The tax dollars that'll go to this, how many of these come from outside residents? None. 100%. So you're asking Keene taxpayers at 100% to fund an agency that has 20 to 30% Keene residents. Now, you know, I'm not heartless. I agree, we take care of our own. But I have a serious problem when all of a sudden we start bringing in, and I do have a problem with their screening process too. There's no question, there's only a couple of shelters in New England that have no screening process that allows sexual offenders to come into their shelters. Ours is one of them right in downtown Keene. That's a problem for me also. Southwest Community Services, up until a few years ago, they were the sole provider for shelters. They did a good job. But once again, you know, this shelter came along, they said, look, if we can do it our way, we don't want city money. In the end, the city said, fine. I think we hold them to the word that we don't fund them at all. But once again, we're talking 20 to 30% Keene residents. Public Works comes to us and says, they want our budget, but 70% of what they do is in the towns around Keene because the towns can't afford it. You going to support it? Police and fire say 70 to 80% of their calls are in the towns around Keene because the towns can't afford it right now. Are you going to support it? You know you're not. So let's treat this, unfortunately, like any other budget that we've got in front of us right now. If 70% are non-Keene residents, you don't support it. You support the Keene taxpayers that push you here.
Council Fileault, you're quoting the 70%, which was the threshold in 1998. Are you suggesting that that is still used today? It's my understanding that the standard today, that this has been modified substantially and that that is no longer the standard that is being used.
From speaking with city clerk and staff, this is still used along with the scoring system.
Okay, let me ask the city clerk.
I'm sorry, Counselor, I didn't mean to give that impression. My understanding is there is no numerical scoring system used.
Okay. Well, I just want to, let me point out to the council, and you have this in front of you, the guidelines. Whether staff's changed it over the years, to allow 30% of non-key residents to receive 100% funding, then so be it. My opinion is we support, we take care of our own, not an agency that brings in 70% non-key residents.
City manager?
The only opinion I would offer is the staff does not change it, would be the city council over the years would be changing it constantly.
Thank you.
Councilor Greenwald?
Thank you, Your Honor. Not going to beat this. I think we all know how we're each going to vote. But the phrase that I heard about a compromise, I guess the compromise is that this motion didn't ask for 36,000. Or I didn't hear any rational reason where these numbers came from. What methodology was there to give one organization 1,500 and not 2,500? So that is the emotional move that just isn't right. We should take this up in the budget policies. I just don't see it. So if that's the compromise, that it's less than it could be, that's fine. And the rationalization that we find the money from other money not spent, I don't know, you spend it all, you spent $1. That's what it is. And if it doesn't get spent, it goes back to the taxpayer. So whether the money wasn't going to be spent and now it's going to be spent, there is no revenue to offset this. So it is an increase.
Councilor Chadbourne for the first time.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to staff for putting this budget. And thank you to my fellow councilors and the FOP committee. I would have to say that Councilor Jacobs, when he got up, he addressed the idea that, I'm not prepared to speak, but he addressed that this isn't just random, that we listened to a lot of testimony, and we reviewed the budget, and we reviewed, for those of us that have been here more than a year, previous budgets, and there hasn't been an increase for these agencies. I think everybody who's talking tonight's got a little emotion. You're saying that it's in